So let's talk about one of the most famous and famously difficult books of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger's Being and Time. Now, I know, it looks intimidating. It's a dense, challenging work for sure. But here's the secret. Its entire massive investigation is built around a single, fundamental question. A question that somehow we've all completely forgotten how to ask.
Right off the bat, Heidegger kicks off his book not with his own words, but with these from Plato. And that's a huge clue. It tells us that this question of being isn't some new, weird academic problem. No, it's an ancient mystery. The Greeks were already wrestling with it. And Heidegger's big point is that we haven't just failed to solve it, we become so complacent that we don't even realize there's a problem anymore.
So what is this ultimate question? It's this. What does to be actually mean? I mean, think about it. We use the word is probably hundreds of times a day. We say, the sky is blue, or I am hungry, or that is a chair. But what are we really saying when we use that little word? What does it truly mean for something, anything, to be?
To even begin to get at an answer, Heidegger realizes he has to reopen what you can think of as philosophy's oldest cold case. This is a mystery that was once the central investigation of all thought, but it's been sitting in a box, gathering dust for centuries.
For the heavyweights of ancient philosophy, like Plato and Aristotle, this was the question. Everything else, all other knowledge, depended on it. But somewhere along the line, a kind of dogma settled in, this belief that, the case is closed. The question's either too simple to be interesting or too complicated to answer. Heidegger shows up to say, nope, that's a huge, huge mistake.
So you gotta ask, why did the case go cold in the first place? Well, Heidegger argues it's because of three mistaken assumptions. Think of them as three false leads that have sent philosophers down the completely wrong path for centuries and convinced them to just give up the investigation. Now, the first false lead, it sounds like total common sense. The concept of being applies to absolutely everything, right? Stars, numbers, people, ideas, they all are in some sense. So if it applies to everything, it must be the most simple, general, catch-all concept we've got. Simple enough.
But Heidegger just flips this whole idea on its head. He says the fact that being is so universal doesn't make it clear at all. In fact, that's precisely what makes it so obscure. Because it applies to everything, it's almost impossible to pin down what it means in any one specific case. So he says, it's not our clearest concept, it's actually the darkest of all.
Okay, false lead number 2. This one also sounds pretty logical. You know how we define things, right? We put them in a bigger category, and then we say how they're different. Like, a dog is an animal that barks. But what category could being itself possibly fit into? There isn't one. It's the ultimate category, so you can't define it. End of story. Case closed.
And Heidegger says, yeah, you're right, you can't define being like it's a chair. But he argues that doesn't mean we should just stop asking. Actually, it's the opposite. The fact that it's indefinable is exactly why we have to investigate it. It's a demand. It forces us to think in a completely new way, to get past these simple definitions and really grapple with what it means.
And this brings us to the third, and honestly the most powerful false lead, the one we all fall for every single day. It's the simple idea that the meaning of is just obvious. Everyone uses the word. Everyone understands it. So what's the big deal? What's there to even investigate? It's self-evident.
For Heidegger, this everyday, casual understanding of is basically a mask. It gives us this illusion of clarity, and it stops us from seeing the deep, deep mystery hiding underneath. And here's the kicker. The fact that we use the word so easily, but we can't actually explain what it means, that's the ultimate proof that we absolutely must ask the question all over again.
Okay, so if those were all false leads, how do we start a proper investigation? Heidegger argues that before we can even hope to find the answer, we have to learn how to ask the question correctly. We need a proper method.
He breaks down any question you could ever ask into 3 simple parts. First, what are you actually asking about? That's your target. Second, where are you going to go to look for clues? That's your source of information. And third, what are you hoping to find out? That's your goal. It's a formal structure for our investigation.
So let's apply this to our big case. The thing we're asking about, the meaning of being. The source of our clues, the things we have to interrogate. Well, that would be entities, all the actual things that exist in the world. And our goal? To get a clear concept, a real understanding of what being means. Okay, so far so good. But this leads to a massive problem.
If we have to interrogate entities to figure out the meaning of being, which entity do we start with? A rock? A star? A triangle? An idea? This is the exact point where Heidegger has his breakthrough discovery, where he finds the one essential clue that just cracks this whole case wide open.
And this question is the pivot for everything. I mean, there are countless entities in the universe. Choosing the right one to start our investigation with is everything. If we choose the wrong one, the whole project is flawed right from the beginning. So, what's the right choice?
And Heidegger's answer is just brilliant. He says, wait a second. The very act of asking this question, that's a way of being. And whose way of being is it? Well, it's the mode of being of the entity that's doing the asking. The key isn't some object out there in the world. The key is the investigator. The key is us.
Heidegger gives this unique entity, us, a special name. He calls it Dasein, which literally just means being there. That's you. That's me. So what makes Dasein so special? Well, Dasein is the only entity in the universe for whom its own being is an issue. Think about it. A rock doesn't worry about what it means to be a rock. A star doesn't sit around contemplating its own existence. But we do. Our existence is a constant question for us, and that makes Dasein the perfect starting point for this whole investigation.
Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, this is a pretty interesting philosophical puzzle, but why does it matter? Well, Heidegger argues this isn't just a puzzle. This is the single most important question of all. It's the very foundation for everything else we claim to know.
To see why, we have to quickly understand the difference between two kinds of questions. There are ontical inquiries. That's what the sciences do. They investigate specific things, specific entities. Biology asks, what is an organism? Physics asks, what is matter? But then there's the ontological inquiry, which is way more fundamental. It doesn't ask what something is, it asks what it means for it to be in the first place.
And this is the real payoff. Every single science, from physics to biology to history, has to start with a bunch of basic assumptions about the kind of being that its objects have. Physicists just take for granted what it means for matter to exist. Biologists take for granted what life is, but they never actually question that foundation. And Heidegger says, without asking that deeper ontological question, all of our science is basically built on sand. It's blind.
Let's make that really concrete. Physics can tell you every last detail about a planet's composition and its orbit, but it can never tell you what it means for a planet to exist at all. That's a more basic, a more fundamental question. Psychology can describe human behavior, but the question of what it means to be human, that's more fundamental. You see, the question of being is the ground beneath everything.
So, have we solved philosophy's oldest cold case? Not even close. But just in these first few pages of Being in Time, Heidegger's done something pretty remarkable. He's cleared away centuries of dusty old prejudices, he's exposed all the false leads, and for the first time in a long, long time, he's put us on the right trail by identifying that one crucial clue, us, Dasein. The rest of this massive book, well, that's the investigation that follows.
And this brings this whole giant abstract investigation right back to where it started. You. Heidegger's central claim is that you, as Dasein, are the one being in the entire universe for whom being is an open question. So the ultimate takeaway here isn't just some philosophical concept, it's a deeply personal one. What does it mean that your own existence is something you have to constantly figure out? What does that mean for you, right now, in your life?